Hello guys, welcome back. My name is Nathan and today we need to talk about some huge Montreal Canadiens trade rumors that have come up over the last week regarding John Klingberg and the Habs getting close to a deal in the offseason, the Kirby Dach trade that happened in the draft that came close to not happening, and a bunch of new details surrounding that trade, as well as big trade rumors regarding Sean Monahan and Josh Anderson, with Monahan potentially going to the Avs and Anderson as well, likely being dealt this season. Now, when it comes to the Habs, what are the latest news and the latest details? Well, make sure you watch till the end for all of the hockey content and all the trade rumor breakdowns. Only 50% of you guys are subscribed, so make sure you hit that subscribe button for more hockey content just like this. Now, let's first start off with the Montreal Canadiens trade rumors in John Klingberg, who of course signed the one-year $7 million deal with the Anaheim Ducks this last offseason, and offensively has been fine, I guess, but has been pretty trash defensively this season for Anaheim, and especially on that defense has not been what they needed. But of course, he went to Anaheim, but we saw recent confirmation from Pierre LeBrun that the Montreal Canadiens were also in on John Klingberg and also in on the sweepstakes, with this post saying the Canadiens also offered John Klingberg a one-year deal last summer before he chose the Anaheim Ducks. And really interesting news there, especially considering the Habs cap situation and how strapped they were. Allegedly, Kent Hughes was going in hard on John Klingberg, wanted to get that deal done, offered a one-year deal before, of course, he chose Anaheim. And I would have expected that John Klingberg likely got more from the Ducks, getting that $7 million deal just for the cap space reasons alone, with Anaheim having way more even now than the Montreal Canadiens do, but also because of the fits and the potential there too. I feel like if I was John Klingberg, I'd rather go to Anaheim just because it's California and you're likely getting a little bit more money as well from just the pure deal. But it does seem like Kent Hughes was in on him quite a bit and was close to getting a deal done, which would have made this Habs roster way different this season. And even though John Klingberg has 7 points up to this point and offensively has done some nice things, again, that defensive play has been just awful in so many ways. And I think for the Montreal Canadiens, yes, he would have been interesting to have, nice to have in some ways, specifically for the power play. In others, it would have been a huge detriment to that defense and would have put even more pressure on top of guys like Kaden Guhle and Arber Xhekaj to really perform defensively, which they're already under so much pressure. Adding Klingberg would have made that even crazier. So I think for Montreal, even though maybe short term it might be something where they would have liked to still have John Klingberg, I think in the long term they'll still be counting their lucky stars that Klingberg did not accept their deal. Even with how he's played this year, he's been one of the worst defensive players in the league, and it would have made the whole Montreal team have way more responsibility on their shoulders, which again, considering how young they are, is not exactly what you want to have. But now going on to one of the most interesting stories of the Montreal Canadiens, especially this season, but just over the last year, in Kirby Dach, who is now around a point per game pace and has been excellent since going on that first line with Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki. There was a new article released that went deep into the Kirby Dach trade, how it came to be, and how draft day could have been so much different for the Montreal Canadiens. Now, all of this is going through Google Translate, so some things might not be exactly correct, but it starts by saying that Kent Hughes was checking in with general manager Kyle Davidson about Kirby Dach and really focusing in on him, trying to acquire him at the draft. But Kyle Davidson, however, is more greedy at the start. He demands a top 10 pick in return for his young center. Montreal drafts first, but there is obviously no question of giving up this choice for Dach despite his great potential. The challenge is daunting. Since the Canadiens do not draft before the 26th rank thereafter, the team still holds the first pick of the second round at 33rd place and another second round pick, but the other clubs do not bite the offer to give up several choices to drop several places in the first round. CH has a hope in its sights and has already tested the ground beforehand. Now it goes on to say how Alexander Romanov was on trade rumors and how for the Habs, their left shot defenseman depth position is extraordinarily strong with guys like Guhle, Harris, Edmondson, and of course later with Mike Matheson. But going through it, saying a deal with the Chicago Blackhawks still seems unlikely as the Bell Center begins to fill up on draft night July 7th. We cling on to the hope of seeing the Islanders accept the two choices for the 13th, but we doubt that it is enough to bite the GM Lou Lamoriello in the bait. The CH are less than 2 hours away from shaking up the hockey community by drafting Juraj Slafkovsky in the first place when Hughes and Lamoriello finally talk to each other again. The GM of the Canadiens then pulls out the card he secretly kept in his game, Alexander Romanov. Hughes raises Davidson. He may not have a top 10 pick, but he's close. However, the offer must be improved, and the Canadiens also agree to give up a third-round pick in 66, the first in this round. Everything is happening very quickly, and the pressure is mounting at a crazy pace since Montreal must also announce its surprising selection in the first round. But then it goes through the selections with Logan Cooley, of course, after that, Shane Wright, and everything that happened afterwards, and then the crowd roaring when Gary Bettman officially announced the Romanov trade, and of course the Kirby Dach trade, and we get some good information on just how crazy it was, how there was so many points where Kent Hughes could have just given up on going after Kirby Dach, but of course went through the process with the Islanders to trade Romanov, get those picks, and then send those picks to the Chicago Blackhawks to get Kirby Dach in the end. And especially so far this season, he's looked like a completely different player and has fit extraordinarily well with the Habs top brass, and so far it's looking like yet another great deal by Kent Hughes. But in this article, the info does not stop, and we get a couple of interesting details with the Montreal Canadiens and their process on draft day. And it says this: the day is not over yet. The Canadiens covet another center. It is, it seems, the Swede Noah Ostlund, ranked among the 5 best hopes on the CH list, according to certain rumors, perhaps even higher. So this paragraph saying that for the Habs, Noah Ostlund was in their top 5. They had him as one of the top 5 best prospects in the draft, if not higher. And I was a big Ostlund fan, but having him top 5 is definitely bold. So far, I think he's played extraordinarily well in the Allsvenskan, but you can see the Habs were going after Ostlund too. The idea of drafting with a 13th pick acquired from the Islanders did not cross the minds of management, since we are convinced that they will no longer be available at this rank. So the Habs thought that Ostlund wouldn't have been available at 13th overall, and of course would later get selected by Buffalo 16th overall, but they thought that that would not be able to get it done. Hence this first quick transaction with the Blackhawks on the eve of the draft. When Detroit chooses center Marco Kasper in 8th place and not Ostlund, we start to hope again in the Montreal camp, but the numerous attempts to climb 10, 12, and even 15 ranks remains unsuccessful. The Sabres will eventually set their sights on Ostlund in 16th place. Efforts to advance to the first round are over for the Montreal Canadiens. So we get a lot of good info there that the Canadiens were also trying to again rise up in that top 10, rise up in that top 15. Of course, if going through everything, they had that 13th overall pick. They didn't think it would be good enough to get Ostlund. They traded that for Kirby Dach, but then of course Ostlund was available and they tried to trade back into that top 15 with no success. And I just imagine a potential draft class of having Slafkovsky and of course Ostlund. I mean, obviously Machar I think is going to be solid for the Habs, but Ostlund and Slafkovsky would have been a couple of great picks inside the first round. So going on from another crazy story there, let's go on to some trade rumors here revolving around Sean Monahan. First things first, and we got another update here from Puck Empire and Pierre LeBrun specifically, who said Sean Monahan could be another forward that the Colorado Avalanche take a look at. And we've already seen Sean Monahan in spurts, has done really well for the Canadiens and has finished extraordinarily solidly too. And to me, he is an obvious candidate to be a trade deadline ad, maybe even sooner. I mean, for the Habs, you don't want to risk him going on a 10-game pointless streak and having that value tank, and we've seen some inconsistency already in his play this season. So it makes sense that the Habs will be trading him, and it's a sure bet. I mean, do not keep this guy. You already got a potential first-round pick. If you can get more, that's an even bigger W for Hughes. And you see this season, he's been solid in 15 games, has 3 goals, 5 assists, 8 points, has been fine, but also isn't at the level that you really would need to keep him, that he needs to be a core part of the franchise going forward. He's been solid, he's been good in his role, but makes so much sense to get dealt. Now, the problem is, I have no clue how the Habs are able to trade Sean Monahan to many teams, especially the Colorado Avalanche, because of that cap hit. At $6.375 million, that's a lot to have to pay Monahan, and even at 50% retained, that's still a good chunk of change, around 3.15, and you look at the Colorado Avalanche's cap situation, they right now have a projected $124,000, or that's their projected cap space. As of right now, they have $6 million to work with, but that's really only because they have Landeskog and Darren Helm LTR, which puts up $8.125 million against that. So they would be still a couple a million in the red even without a potential Sean Monahan trade. But I guess there are options on the team if they wanted to trade maybe an Evan Rodrigues, if they wanted to trade maybe an Eric Johnson. But again, I feel like a lot of hoops would have to be pulled through for that to happen. Maybe you trade a player like Samuel Girard. Maybe we see that finally happen. But I would expect at least you could see a Pavel Francouz potentially go. Maybe you have a maybe Sean Monahan and Samuel Montembeault type trade if the Colorado Avalanche really want to go crazy. And Montembeault's been, of course, great in the games he's played, making $1 million, and he could be a strong backup behind Georgiev. They really need somebody back there. But I would expect at least a couple of contracts to have to go back the Habs' way, which, again, considering how cap-strapped they are too, makes things quite difficult. But to me, there are a couple of really interesting options on teams that could maybe trade for Sean Monahan. The first one I want to mention here is the Detroit Red Wings, who are in an interesting position for me. When you look at their current cap situation, they got 4.225 in projected cap space. But when it comes to their center scenario right now, they got Larkin, Kopp, Veleno, and Rasmussen. But I could see a situation where Detroit maybe gets a little bit impatient with Veleno, and if they're in a playoff position come February and really want to make an upgrade onto that center core, having Sean Monahan as a third line center I think would be pretty ideal for the Red Wings, and their center core of Larkin, Kopp, Monahan, and Rasmussen would bring a lot of great edge, especially come playoff time. And I think Monahan could be in an interesting position there too. But again, there likely might have to still be some heavy salary retention there. But maybe we see a Sean Monahan for Joe Veleno swap. I mean, Veleno has 3 points this season so far, hasn't been as impactful as you want to see, but he's 22, he's still young, he could still be impactful. But I feel like for the Habs, that might be another situation where they get a younger center in exchange for something else. But I feel like Monahan would be a big upgrade over what they have now. But another team that I think makes a lot of sense, another Atlantic team, is the Ottawa Senators. If they are truly still hell-bent on making the playoffs this year, you of course have that Josh Norris injury, which has hurt a ton for them. But adding Sean Monahan, especially if he gets a little bit of power play time, I think could be really interesting. And they have $3.3 million of cap space, so technically right now it could work. But to me, I still think the priority should be defense, which is why I think Detroit might be a better fit for a deal. Also, another team that makes a lot of sense to me is the Minnesota Wild, whose center situation is rather weird right now, especially with Hartman and his lack of consistent health. But you see at $2.5 million of projected cap space, I think they're in a unique position to potentially trade for a player like Monahan. If you go for that 50%, you get around 3.1. You'd only have to offload maybe one contract, and that could probably be a Tyson Jost, for example, and they could probably get rid of him pretty easily. So I could see something like that happening where the Habs are able to give that deal up and get a player like Jost. It could be maybe Jost and maybe like a third round pick or something. Probably not anything crazy considering Monahan still hasn't lit the world on fire. But again, I could see the Habs getting good value and again getting more picks in these Sean Monahan trades, which is exactly what they did in bringing him on and what they should do when they bring him out. And of course, last but not least, we got this excerpt with Josh Anderson and a potential trade from the Hockey Writers and their trade rumor articles. This one says, Montreal Hockey Now's Mark Dumont recently suggested that Canadiens would be smart to trade Josh Anderson, which I would definitely agree on that, arguing that Anderson may struggle to fit into the team's new identity as a puck-focused and puck-control team. That deal should come sooner than later, and while Anderson's value is still high. Marco D'Amelio believes the Calgary Flames might be a good fit and cited Sportsnet's Elliotte Friedman report on Saturday that they are in the market for a scoring forward. This is a player the Calgary Flames have in the past had very real significant interest in, and I wonder if they revisit Josh Anderson, salary retained by Montreal, as they search for more finishing up front. If Anderson is not a fit, perhaps a name like Mike Hoffman makes sense. His $4.5 million contract would be a little bit easier to fit into the Flames roster, even though that would still be a challenge. So some more trade rumors regarding Josh Anderson, even potentially Mike Hoffman, but as of right now, there is so many options with this Canadiens team, but I am pretty confident that Kent Hughes will do the job and get maximum value, because right now, there's a lot of pieces that the Habs have to trade off, especially come trade deadline time. he's going to be pretty busy, and I think we'll do the right things for this rebuild. But that'll be it for today, guys. A lot of new Habs trade rumors coming out recently, and a lot to look forward to over the next year. Let me know what you guys think about the John Klingberg news, about the Kirby Dach draft story, about, of course, Sean Monahan, where you guys think he could go. Do you see him going to Colorado? Do you see him going to a different team? As well as Josh Anderson and Mike Hoffman. Let us know all your trade thoughts down below. Of course, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. Comment down below all your thoughts. Share the video with your friends. Get it to all the hockey and Habs fans you guys know online. And click this card for all the trade rumor content right in one playlist. My name is Nathan. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.